those of you who are first-timers here, we've been going through the letter to Philippians for about 11 weeks now. And we'll be shifting next week to really speak about outreach. And for this week here, we're going to have sort of the last of a couple lessons that relate to us as a body. And Philippians chapter 2, verses 14 to 15. Now, before I start, I want to say that next week we're going to really speak about outreach in Fusion, but this will be something discussing ourselves. Acacia has a small group at the Denaros. Raise your hands, the Denaros tonight. If you're interested in a small group, it's every other Sunday night, and feel free to come to that or ask them about it, or Acacia, the worship leader, if you're not a part of one. We also have a small group for UMass students. All right, let's get going here. Do everything without grumbling or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. I've kind of put together a few translations myself, and this is the Gonzalez translation. Be ever on your guard against a complaining and contentious spirit. Now, Philippians chapter 2, verses 14 was right after we really got to the heart of who Jesus Christ is. I'm going to begin with two somewhat funny stories and then get into teaching the Word. One thing is the reason we shouldn't complain and tell people our problems is because 20% of the people you'll talk to don't care. The other 80% are glad you have them. The other thing is we've got a couple identical twins in the body, two right here, another two that are not here. But sometimes identical twins make a point of trying to seem different from each other. We'd have never seen that before, but there's this story that my wife gave me, an illustration of these two boys. And one of them was an optimist to beat optimism. Every day was May, nothing in the world to complain about. And the other one is a pessimist and complained incessantly, very gloomy, very sultry and down. And so he said, maybe I could do something to try to even them out. So they had separate rooms, and he went in the complaining boy's room at night, and he filled it with every toy that he knew that the boy liked. Electronics, sports things. He loaded the room with all those things. And then he went into the other boy's room that it was the optimist, and just everything was great. And he filled it waist high with horse manure. It's not a true story as far as I know. So the children got up the next day, and he first went into his first twin son's room. And when he was in the room, he looked, and the boy was on the edge of his bed with his hand on his chin, and he was moping. And his dad said, "What's the problem?" And he said, "All these things need batteries, and we know that they break all the time because they're just toys, and they're plastic, and they're not going to last, and now my room's cluttered, and I have more to clean." Okay. Let's go in the other room, see if I got any more success. He goes in the other room, and the optimistic child is waist high in the horse manure, throwing it up in the air, having a party. What are you doing? He said, "Look, with all this horse manure, there's got to be a pony in here somewhere." So, I'm not a comedian, but this whole idea of complaining. Now, I personally don't have it with me, but I have a black belt in complaining, and so I'm an expert in it. And if there's ever a lesson where I say, I don't know why you want me to be up here and teach this verse, I'll just say that this is one of them. So what I've been doing and what I encourage people to do is that maybe at your desk or maybe at your work spot or wherever you are, I have one sticky note that says, "Speak evil of no man." Maybe put up another one that says, "Be on your guard against a complaining and contentious spirit." Just put it up there. Maybe like have something with a hat that has a sign and it can be right in front of your face all day. So what is complaining? Complaining is that we are annoyed by situations or other people. It's never about ourselves, after all. And what is the problem with complaining? My big point with complaining is that when we are complaining, we are basically insulting God. So complaining's funny and everybody does it until we see the consequences of complaining. And the consequences of complaining are that we get stuck in our walk with God at that point that we're complaining about. Now, for those who haven't heard this, you can listen online. But earlier in Philippians, we talked about the grace of God, that He gives us gifts. And we said that joy just means literally that the grace is recognized. And then we learned that thanksgiving is that grace is appreciated. Complaining is a joyless, thankless attitude, which means that we don't recognize grace and we don't appreciate it in a situation. So if you forget everything I say about complaining, the problem with complaining is there is something God has for you in that situation that you aren't seeing or don't want to see, and you're missing it. That's the problem with complaining. If you stop complaining, then you can see it and hear it. This might just be as simple as being stuck in a grocery line and being delayed that way, and maybe you're going to be late for something. The second you stop complaining, maybe you see the next person next to you, that they need your help or a prayer or whatever the situation could be. This situation doesn't mean just stuck in a grocery line. Some of us in our life feel like we're stuck in a grocery line. We feel like our life isn't going where we want it to go and how we want it to go. There is something in that pause that God is trying to teach us. And until we listen and until we learn it, He won't move on to the next thing. It's like learning your ABCs. If you skip A, they're not going to teach you B. You've got to do A first. We've got to start at A. And then when we get it, we'll go to the next thing. About 5 weeks ago, I spoke about it this way. In every disadvantage, there's a what? Advantage. The advantage word is in the disadvantage. You just have to find the advantage that God has for you. Okay, these are what I'm saying with this letter that it builds. But with a complaining spirit, bad things are always happening to you, nobody else. There's this idea of that complainers operate in bad faith. They don't even tell it straight. It's always jaded towards them. There's usually a little exaggeration. My father had a hobby store which had tons of little plastic models and things. And once a year we had to take inventory because it was before computers. And we had to count every little thing. And so some of us, when we're complaining all the time, need to stop and take an inventory in our life and really say, what is happening? And God, what are you really trying to do in my life? What are you trying to teach me and show me that I am missing by this belly aching? Now, I have 5 children. My 3 oldest, when they were younger, were homeschooled, and I was their physical education teacher. We've got some athletic people, and so Dad got the whistle, got them up in the morning, and told them we're going to run around the block, which is about a quarter of a mile where I lived back then. And it was maybe 50 degrees out, not much cooler than now, and we're going to run around it twice. The first lap wasn't so bad. By the second lap, they were belly aching. Now, they're all up in Sunday school, but they were belly aching like crazy. They were crying that their ears hurt. They couldn't wait to get inside to get some sympathy from Mommy on how awful Dad was the whole time. Now, just as they were going into the threshold to go into the house, and they were all sobbing and holding back to wait till they got in to really let loose, I just said, guys, one thing before you go in. If any of you complain or cry in the house, you're running another lap. They all swallowed their tongues. I was running. Good. I'm going to give a parenting tip, and we're going to start to weave parenting in to these lessons. I know some of you guys are students, but you can use this on your roommate too, okay? And that is this whining attitude. How do you deal with it with children? Very simple. When we were with our young children and one of them would whine, we had two rules. One is, whatever you whine about, you don't get. Period. So that's it. You don't get it. If you whine about it, you don't get it. Make that clear. The second thing is that we would all sit there and we would say in unison, whining doesn't work. And then all the people, including the whiner, would have to say, whining doesn't work. Come on, church. Whining doesn't work. And the whiner wouldn't say that right away, and we would repeat it until the whiner joined in. Then the whiner would sometimes laugh at themselves because it is ridiculous to whine. There is this kid on TV. I don't know if he's still there. It's a comic kid. I know he's got the devil in him, Caillou or something like that. And he has an unbelievably whining voice. And I ran from where I was when my kids had this TV show on, like it was MTV. I told them, do not listen to this and do not watch the show. They sort of looked at it and said, it's PBS, Dad. And I said, I don't care. I don't know who that kid is, but he doesn't live here. And that's it. No whining. It doesn't work. There's no place for it. Okay? So now let's get to contentious. I just say one other thing about complaining. And I'm not trying to be crass here, but Samson killed 1,000 with the jawbone of an ass, and more than 1,000 have been killed by the ass's jaw, and you'll have to think about that later in terms of complaining. But in terms of the word contentious, okay? Contentious, contentious, I don't know, is that 3 or 4 syllables? Where's my wife to help me with that? I liked math. It's a lot of words, okay? It's a lot of syllables. It essentially means, contentious means to be likely to cause an argument. And for that matter, to like to cause an argument. The fact is that we're all that way a little bit, right? We like to cause an argument, and we're likely to cause an argument. It's like a kid with sports. They tend to like what they're good at, and they're good at what they like. Okay? So, what does a contentious spirit look like? A contentious spirit has nothing to do with the people around them. It's something that that person themselves has. A contentious spirit is that you like to have a disagreement. There is nothing too small that's not worth the disagreement and the time to take a disagreement. That's a form of it. There's many forms of contentiousness. That one is bickering. To bicker is to pick anything to argue about and take the time to do it. So that's one level. The bickering has a fussiness in it. There's a fussiness in bickering, that nothing's right. The waiter and the waitress doesn't do it right. The food isn't cooked right. People in service industry hate fussy people. The bed isn't right. This isn't right. That was noisy. This is that. This is this. And so it's always complaints. And forget about when you get these people on the phone. Because when you can't see the person, then you can really unload on them. All that contentiousness comes out. It's this wearisome tendency to fight. Let me unpack that. Wearisome means it wears you down. They wear you down. They're often interesting people, by the way. They're interesting. They're kind of funny or creative or have an engaging personality at first. And then the contentiousness comes in, where let's just argue about this. Let's go through all these maneuvers over and over again, complaining, Murmuring kind of sounds like what it is. I know there's a word for that, but I don't know that either. But this is what I want you to understand is that a contentious spirit spoils relationships. Let me tell you how. If you forget everything I say, I want you to get a hold of this one. A contentious spirit is based on self. It's selfish thinking. It's not a dynamic between two people. It's something someone has in themselves. Here's the problem with that. It's not only confusing to other people, but it's worse. It reinforces in the other people their position. Let me put it this way. A contentious person, when they speak to someone, makes that person less apt to reconsider. So let's just say I have an argument here with Jack over here. But I actually see in Jack that there's something that's really harmful in his life. And even God would agree with me. But the contentious spirit makes him less apt to change his position rather than more apt. Now, Steve's a mason here. You need 3 things to make concrete. Okay, you need sand, water, and then cement, right? Something like that. You mix them together, you get concrete. I know a little bit about it from my backyard right now. So take a parent with a child, and the parent is in quicksand. They're in sand with water, and they're sinking. And the parent goes over there and pours cement, Portland cement, into the quicksand. Now you've got concrete. They're stuck in that situation. How does that happen? What am I describing? What is that an illustration for? If you are on your kids all the time, and no point is too small to argue and beat them down on, that they don't only just tune you out, that they actually will go out of their way to resist you, to oppose you. They are then less apt to reconsider. The child is worse off because you corrected them. They're further from God. They're the worst for talking to you. That's what contentious spirit produces. Do people understand what I'm saying here? Yeah, for sure? Because I want to make sure why does God say be on your guard against the contentious spirit? Just because he doesn't like arguing? No, this is what it produces. This is what the result of a contentious spirit does. There's all different shapes of it. You might be somebody that likes to air speculations. That's contentious. I don't mean like the America, bombed the World Trade Center. That's the conspiracy theory number whatever, 1,000, all this stupid stuff. I mean just doing that in day-to-day things, assigning the worst motives, speculating instead of speaking to the person, not giving them the benefit of the doubt. That's a contentious spirit. That's how it plays out. It can be in a child, a petulant spirit. A petulant is just a bad-natured child. Just they get up out of bed on, just cranky from day one. They had their full night's sleep. Their belly isn't empty, and they're cranky. You see, there's different ways that this contentiousness shows itself, but it's ultimately an intellectual rebellion against God. That's what's happening. Your mind is rebelling against God, and so you're just the bull in a china shop, just smacking at everything. Nothing's too small to fight. You're testy. It's heated. In some people, you see them, they're so quickly mad. They're always close to it. It's a boss. It's somebody you work for. It's somebody who works for you. It's people you know. This complaining, this contentiousness, talk radio, industries are built around this. Lawyers arguing, fighting, settling things. This is 20% of society today is complaining and contentiousness. It's everywhere. People make money off of it all the time. But the key, this is what I'd say to my kids. So I have older kids, younger kids. If the older kids are playing with the younger kids, maybe teasing them a little, and the younger kids don't like it, But the older kids think it's something funny. It's not funny unless it's funny to the kids that are the younger kids. It's only funny if it's funny to everybody. Otherwise, it's bullying, right? It's only funny when it's funny to everyone. So it's the same thing. You go and you talk to somebody and you exhort them, and they walk away beat up, and you walk away saying, I just did a great job. I directed them. I disciplined them in the Lord. It's not helpful unless it's helpful to them. Okay? It's not helpful. It doesn't mean that everyone always listens or that everyone always responds. But if your spirit, a contentious spirit, and we believe in spirits in this church, we're not just talking about psychology here. If you have embraced that type of spirit, then that spirit goes before you and creates this, that other people are the worst for meeting you. They're less apt to follow God. They're less apt. Look, if the world has some bad thing that they've done, and they have, be like Aaron and hold your peace. We all could complain about 1,000 things. We all could correct 1,000 things in other people. And so be wary of this. Just stop right now. Do I complain? Do I have a contentious spirit? Is this something that I'm dealing with? And really hold up the mirror. So the scripture here, the chip version. Be ever on your guard against a complaining and contentious spirit. Then I go back to the NIV. So that you may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. We talked a few weeks ago about blameless, that it's this idea of purity and transparency. The opposite is to be fake. Don't be fake. Don't be a fake person. Be real. And now I would just say for Fusion itself here, just for us, because I try to speak about us. Here we are. We have some new people here, but just those of you who are regular, this is your home. Be on your guard against this here. Murmuring against other people, against me, against you. Let's be on our guard against this. Let's really take this seriously. Take this to heart. A contentious spirit, arguing, fighting, bickering, petulance, whining. Let's watch for this. Really, let's root this out. We'll come back to that at the end when I really start preaching. But be on your guard against this. And just pray that for us here. It shows itself in different ways. You know, if there's somebody more talented, then it can come out with complaining, with slander. You know, saying things that just aren't the way it was. Rather be blameless. I was trying to think of blameless in a different way because I spoke about it a few weeks ago, and I thought of the difference between a sheep and a goat. The goats, what do? Bam, they smash into each other with their horns. The sheep, they're hornless. It's not really saying, he's not really saying, you know, you're a goat, but don't act like one. He's really saying be a sheep. You know, I know that you can pull claws out of cats, and I don't like them, so go ahead. But the sheep and goats, they're just inherently different. He's saying be a sheep, okay? Meaning they can't bite somebody else and tear at them because they don't have the teeth to do it. They don't have the fangs. They can't make them toxic because they don't have poison. You know, be this way. That's what God is telling us. Be hornless. If you have arrows, if you're so inclined, dip them with love. If you're outgoing and you have a sword, may it be the sword of the Spirit. Let these be your weapons, not your sharp tongue, not your wit, not your quick answer, not your put down. Okay? Let this murmuring go. Again, murmuring sounds like what it is. Murmur, there's people here at Fusion. Forget about the murmuring. Look, we have people, I counted it, we have more than people from more than 10 nations here and 50 people. We weren't all raised by the same mother and father, okay? We weren't from even the same thing. Some of us were from Christian families, some of us not. So we have to meet around Christ here with how we treat each other. That's what this is talking about. He was talking to them as a church for the sake of the church. So I want to have that moment. I do want you to do this with your spouses or your children or your roommates or your parents or your employees. It's all that. But it's first and foremost here. It has to be here. You know, there's Old Testament examples. David lived in Babylon. Babylon was a completely corrupt and pagan society, and they wanted to put him in jail and punish him, Daniel. And what did the people come and say to the people that wanted to do that? We have nothing against him except the law of his God. That's what we want it to be said of us. We have nothing against them except that they follow Jesus. There's nothing else we can say. And people will have that against us, believe me. They'll take that against us. But let that be the case, that there be nothing against us except the law of Jesus. Except these people follow Jesus. So that's what we're going to have to slander them for and do all these things about. We're having communion today, so I'm going to keep this a little short. But I want to end with this. I want us to think about Job. Those of you who don't know who Job was, he was a great man of great wealth in the Old Testament that suffered a number of calamities. And when he suffered these calamities, there's this moment where we get to go backstage and hear God and the devil, Lucifer, having a discussion about Job. And what does the devil say to God but, sure he loves you. He's got all these kids. He's got all these sheep. He's got all these possessions. And if you sit in that in your life, these material things, these external things, if that's where your love and your heart sits, then you will be susceptible to having them be pulled away from you. They're physical things. That's what we're complaining about all the time. That's what we're being contentious about. It's never this. You love Jesus so much. Knock it off. Tell your spouse, stop being so loving to me. Can't take it. I can't keep up with you. So with Satan and God, what was Satan accusing Job of? Where his love was, what he really was about, where did he get his meaning in life? And God said, no, 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 no. It's not these things. It's me. It's further back. You're wrong, because Satan is not all-knowing. And he said, it's not these things. And he said, well, you wait. Let me take those things away. Let me make them sick. And you'll see, he'll curse you. And I can only imagine for Job that when he had this breaking point, that it wasn't just like, boom, he was good and that's it, but that he died to everything. And all he had left was the Lord. It's this idea of a transcendent moment. What does transcendent mean? Something beyond the natural. Look it up. It's this idea of crossing over from the physical to the spiritual that happened. And when this happened, this transcendent moment, he was broken of everything of who he was as a man. But as he was broken, he really encountered and knew God. He went behind the curtain of all this stuff and got into the spiritual dimension. I don't even know if I can explain this. But it's basically the death of the soul, the death of all who you are on the outside. And Jesus said, if anyone would come after me and follow me, let him die to himself and carry the cross. We plant ourselves in the ground with our complaining, with our murmuring. We want to build like the Israelites in the desert. We want to build our home here. We want to stay right here and complain all day because we like it deep inside. And if you want to follow Jesus, if you want to be here at Fusion, you got to pull that root up, because unless a seed fall to the ground and die, unless you die to yourself, unless you pull that up, and what do you do with that tree? Of course, you make it into a cross like Jesus did. You pull it out, you make it into a cross, and you die on it. How often? Every day. And then when you're not dying on it, you carry it around for the world to see and say, look at that person there. There he goes. One thing I can say, I may not agree with him, but that person loves Jesus. She has given all for Jesus. There is no doubt that she loves Jesus. There is no, the accusers are silenced when that happens, when we get to that. We've got to shut our mouths, let this stuff go, pull it out of the ground, and die on it. Die right here. This is worth dying on. This is the hill worth dying on. But look it, this is how it is. I'll end with this, okay? Look it, he created you, I'm talking Jesus, created every one of you without your consent, without your permission. But he won't save you without it. He won't save you without your permission. I know a little bit about this. I'm a vascular surgeon. I see people with clogged arteries all the time. What do these clogged arteries do? They restrict blood flow to the leg or to other areas, to the brain. Well, I just don't run up down the street when I see somebody like that, tackle them, body slam them, and start doing surgery on them. You wait until you come, and I'm a sinful man, so I am not putting myself in Jesus. I just want you to understand this point. You wait, you come to me, and then you say, I give you permission to fix this condition. And then when you get this condition fixed, then you have this restriction removed. Well, in so much more of a greater way, and 1,000 times more, you need to come to Jesus and say, I need to take this thing out, I need to die to it, and I need to come to you. And that's what communion is here. We're going to have a season where what are we saying? We're saying, I come over here. This is your body. This is your blood. I am taking you into me. I'm giving you consent to work through me. I'm giving you that consent. It says, watch out for this crooked generation. You know what the word crooked means? It's the Greek word scolio. Short for what do we use? Scoliosis, a crooked spine. You know how things were made crooked and twisted? It was a word for a piece of wood that was left with no water and no oil. It became gnarly. And a dried out piece of wood, how it twists, and it's not like a sapling anymore, and it becomes all dried out. That's what a crooked, warped and crooked. Those two words. When I was a kid, before most of you were born, I used to listen to my father's 50s records. And it was in the sunroom, which is a bad place to have the record collection. And I used to lay them out on the windowsills. And then I came back later, and the needle of the thing's up and down, and they're singing all weird. That's warped. That's it. It loses the heat, the sun, the wearisomeness of it all. You get worn down, you get sapped without the Spirit of Jesus. And so there's communion here. This is also anointing oil. If you need prayer and need, and you are that dried out piece of wood, you are that complaining, fixated, petrified forest, and you want freedom, I'll be over here also to pray extra for those who need it. Otherwise, as they're singing the song, feel free to come up here, and let's just have a prayer before we do that. Yes, Father. Forgive us our sins. Forgive us our trespasses. Forgive us that we have walked over to this complaining, contentious spirit that helps nobody. We want to come over to the Eucharist, to the thanksgiving, the appreciation of grace, the appreciation of Christ, the appreciation of Jesus dying for us. We thank you for this, that you left us this. This, your body, your blood, for us, for the forgiveness of sins, for the renewal of our hearts. And we thank you for the oil of your Spirit. There is no magic in that oil. There's no magic in that jar. We know that, God. But we know that it's a symbol of your Holy Spirit, the move of your Spirit in us. And we ask that you would move in the Spirit today, and that we would take a moment to remember you, Father. And Lord God, more importantly, that you would pull this complaining, this bitter root out of us, and that we would die on it, and that we would bring life to it, and that we would carry it around, and that we would bear on our bodies the mark of Jesus.